Hi, General. Thank you for agreeing for the interview. First question. About 2 years ago, you told me in the interview that the territories from Mariupol to Crimea are under special threat, and that Putin is interested in this particular land corridor to Crimea and water supply to Crimea. In his speech of October 14, Putin just confirmed that we needed a corridor and water. Thus, from the very beginning, this was the price for the operation, while Kyiv, Chernihiv, Sumy, and Kharkiv were just a distraction, just a second variant Ukrainian army should pay attention. Is it true?
Yeah, I think for sure the priority has always been Crimea, and to ensure access to Crimea and the sustainability of Crimea. So the water, the land access, all of these are a priority for the Kremlin so that they can maintain their illegal possession of the Crimean Peninsula.
But after all, the officer who were in Kyiv, I don't know if you read this article of Washington Post. They wrote about FSB officer who was responsible for the operation, who were in Kyiv region, and he tried to choose a flat in Kyiv region with a good view. And some officers were wearing their suits for parade, this military suits for parade. They were not aware, they were misled about the real goal of the operation.
Yeah, well, look.
We know the stories that Russian officers and soldiers, they were preparing for parade in Kyiv.
Yeah. Okay, look. For sure, the Kremlin made several strategic miscalculations. They wanted to destroy Ukraine as a state. They wanted to destroy the idea of Ukraine as a state. But they had a real objective, of course, to get Crimea and to ensure the sustainability of Crimea. But if they could also get rid of Ukraine or get rid of the government of President Zelensky and get somebody in there that would be more amenable, let's say, that would have been the outcome. The first miscalculation that the Kremlin made was that they had huge advantage over Ukraine, for what we would call force advantage, and that they would be able to accomplish all of their military tasks in just a few days, almost like Budapest or Prague back during the Cold War. That's what they expected. The second miscalculation that they made, of course, was that the West would not care because we had shown that we were not willing to do much after Georgia, after Crimea, after Syria, and so they probably thought we would continue to not react very strongly. The third miscalculation they made was that whatever pain or punishment they had, it would be worth it because the gain would be so much. And then finally, they believed that not only would they destroy Ukraine, but that they would also break NATO. So these were four strategic miscalculations by the Kremlin. And what they've had to do, they've had to change their goals, at least the public goals, every time they were stopped outside Kyiv, the counteroffensive, and now they're getting ready to evacuate Kherson. So I think we're going to hear that the goal was always just Crimea.
How do you like the pace, the methods of the counteroffensive armed forces of Ukraine are doing in East and South? Do you think it's because of the training they had according to NATO standards, or due to the weapon, or what exactly is the?
I think the successful counteroffensive by Ukrainian armed forces is the combination of several factors. Yes, of course, I'm happy that the United States and the UK have helped with providing intelligence, with providing certain weapons, certain capabilities. But this is also the result of very professional and patient planning and execution by the Ukrainian General Staff. Very good professional operational security. We know more about what Russia's doing than we do about Ukraine, which is exactly how it should be. The performance by the soldiers and the junior officers has been superb. The Ukrainian style of command, where leaders at lower levels are able to make decisions based on opportunity, completely different from the Russian method of command, which is a very vertical, centralized, and unwieldy method of command. And We know that war is a test of will, is a test of logistics, and it's clear that Ukrainian soldiers and Ukrainian people have superior will to what we're seeing from Russian soldiers and, of course, Russian people.
I saw that you again signed the letter demanding that Ukraine be provided with more serious weapons. Do you agree that arming Ukraine to defeat Russia is much cheaper for the West than allowing Putin regime to survive, win, and continue to expand into other countries? The West doesn't understand this, or there are other reasons for extending the terms of military assistance. What kind of weapon do you think we need and urgently need to be provided?
Well, the first thing is that we, the West, we need to say we want Ukraine to win. Stop talking about we want Russia to lose or we don't want Ukraine to lose. I mean, these kind of words. Why are we having trouble saying we want Ukraine to win, to regain all of its territory? Now, of course, part of this is there is still concern in the White House and in other Western capitals that somehow if the Kremlin sees that it's going to lose Crimea, for example, or if Ukrainian forces were able to hit targets inside Russia, that this would lead to some kind of escalation. I don't believe it. Russia does have thousands of nuclear weapons, and I take their threats seriously, but I think it's very unlikely that they would use a nuclear weapon because of all the negative consequences they would have to face. And I think the Kremlin and the general staff, the Russian general staff, know this. So I think it's unlikely that they would escalate or to a nuclear conflict if they lost or were about to lose Crimea. So we should stop deterring ourselves. And the sooner that Ukraine is able to accomplish its objectives of the total restoration of sovereignty over its legal boundaries of 1991, the sooner this the killing ends, the sooner this whole war ends, and we can start rebuilding. But by not enabling Ukraine with weapons such as ATACMS or additional capabilities that would allow them to totally defeat Russian forces, in my view, that drags this out, which plays to the advantage of the Kremlin.
But we are speaking not only about ATACMS, I think we are speaking also about F-16. And as far as I know, there is no political will in White House about sharing even old F-16 with Ukraine. Why?
Yeah, I don't know that, of course, other than it's to the same thing that I said earlier, that concern about this somehow escalating, that Russia going to the next level of World War III. So I disagree with that philosophy, as I've tried to describe to you. I disagree with that. But of course, I'm not on the inside there. I don't know all the arguments that are going on, but I think that the White House, which has done a fantastic job on so many things, I think in this particular case, they have overestimated the threat of escalation, and that causes us to deter ourselves. And of course, our European allies will follow our lead. They also stopped short of providing everything necessary for Ukraine to win. Now, Ukraine is still going to win. It's a matter of how much longer does this go on. I think helping Ukraine win would accelerate this and reduce actually the amount of killing and destruction.
These terrorist rocket attacks on critical infrastructure and peaceful cities, also drone attacks. In the first day of terror rocket attacks started, it was 83 missiles and 24 Shahid drones, and shut down only half of that Ukrainian anti-air attack system. What should be done to increase this percentage of destroying these drones and rockets?
Well, once again, Ukrainian armed forces are showing how innovative and savvy they are to achieve that level of shooting down drones and missiles is impressive, particularly when you don't have necessarily the latest weapon designed specifically to do that. Now, it does appear to me that the West is responding very quickly to get more air and missile defense capabilities into Ukraine. This is important. This will help. But of course, the best way to stop these things is to go to the source. to capture the territory or destroy the areas from which they are launching these drones. Of course, a lot of them are coming from Crimea. But if Ukraine is able to identify where they're coming from inside Russia or inside Belarus, they should, of course, be allowed and enabled to hit those as well. Otherwise, they continue to murder innocent Ukrainian people. So Ukraine always has the right to defend itself, and we should be helping that. But we should also be looking at ways to um, uh, stop the delivery from Iran. Now, this is much more complicated than it sounds. And I think there are probably several different efforts underway that would help, either through economic or diplomatic or military means, to reduce or stop the flow of these drones from Iran into Russia. I imagine that there's a transaction involved here between Russia and Iran that will not be good for anybody in the neighborhood. So in the Middle East. So there's a lot of nations, including Israel, that have a real interest in stopping this. So I imagine that there are people that are working on that. Now, of course, Russia using these missile strikes, is intended to break the will of the Ukrainian people. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. Ukrainian people have already demonstrated that their will cannot be broken. Um, of course, the targeting of infrastructure that produces energy ahead of the winter, that's obviously done to make it to try and make cities uninhabitable during wintertime. I anticipate Ukrainian people who are so resilient will find ways to adapt or to deal with this until the use of these missiles and drones can be stopped. One thing, Tetiana, that I've noticed, there's still, even here in the month of October, when it's so obvious that Russia is losing, that they're desperate, they have suffered huge casualties, they have failed on every aspect of their special military operation. They're preparing for the evacuation of Kherson. I mean, even General Sorokin is talking about what a tense situation it is, and they're having to prepare to evacuate civilians, which means that's another problem. They're going to kidnap and deport Ukrainian people. This is another subject we're going to have to stay on top of.
Not only people, children. They even also kidnap children.
I know that. That's what I'm talking about. Over 1 million children are people too. So I'm with you. What I'm saying is that there are still people in the West that cannot imagine or cannot accept the idea that Russia is going to be defeated, that somehow they can't be defeated, or that Putin deserves an off-ramp or something like that. So I use every opportunity I have to try and explain that, yes, Ukraine is going to win. Yes, Russia is going to be defeated. And we should all get used to the idea that Russia is not entitled to an off-ramp. They're not entitled to any of Ukraine's territory. They're not entitled to kidnap adults and children from Ukraine and disperse them around Russia. And so the West has got to stick together here. I believe this is the last winter that Russia is going to be able to disrupt European economies with gas, because everybody has already begun to move away. Even Ukraine is moving away from total reliance on Russian gas and energy. So it'll be a different story next year. And actually, as I look at this situation, as Dr. Snyder said, for Russia, it's bad to lose in Ukraine, but it will be much worse to lose in Russia. And so I think some of the power brokers see that the wheels are coming off, and that they are going to start to pull back some of their private armies, if you will, to protect themselves for the inevitable transition of power that I think is going to happen inside Russia within the next several months.
About mobilization, how much it can help the Russians to at the front line, and now when they just started to bring untrained forces to the front line, and in spring when they will be able to bring more trained personnel?
Well, of course, what they're doing, they're trading bodies for time. They're hoping that with however many thousands of untrained, poorly equipped, unprepared men, they can actually get to the front. They're hoping that this will buy some time to slow down Ukrainian advance and to extend the conflict so that they can prepare for the springtime. I think this whole mobilization idea is a catastrophe for the Kremlin. Obviously the people. It's made clear that Putin is losing control inside Russia. 500,000 Russian men, military age, left Russia to avoid mobilization. That tells you that Russian people have no stomach for this fight. They don't want to be there, and so thousands of men who were grabbed from university, from their apartment, from wherever they were, are going to be sent to their death. That's what's happening here, and the Kremlin does not care about how many people die in the process. So they will not have. I do not believe they will have any kind of significant operational effect against what Ukraine is doing.
Obviously, Putin knows only how to rise strikes. When he began to lose the war, he announced the partial mobilization. Then he will announce the full mobilization, or in reality, do the full mobilization. If he will lose also here with mobilized people, can he also use non-conventional weapon? And how can West prevent the global catastrophe, or at least catastrophe in Ukraine in case of tactical nuclear attack?
Okay, he does not have, and I've only got like 2 more minutes. The Russians do not have the ability to continue to raise more troops. I mean, the logistical infrastructure, the training, the places, the helmets, the boots, all this stuff, they don't have enough. And they're getting ready to have to release people because they have the next wave of normal conscription is about to arrive. They are not prepared because of years of corruption. They are not prepared to do this. And so I would not alarm your viewers by talking about, oh my God, they're going to do a full mobilization. They can't. They can't. And people are not going to show up. We've already seen this. So I'm less concerned there. And as I already said, I don't believe they're going to use a nuclear weapon because there's no advantage to it. And I think the Kremlin and the general staff know that if they use a nuclear weapon, as my president said, the American response will be decisive, very painful, and I think people around Putin realize that there will be life after him. And for a tactical nuclear weapon, the entire Russian general staff chain of command would have to be involved, and I don't think that they're going to be willing to support this. So I think it's unlikely.
Belarus would enter the war because they already deploy new troops there.
Belarus is not going to enter this war. Lukashenko knows. That's why he has avoided it so far. He knows his military is even less competent than Russian military, and that they'll be destroyed in the first days. And then he won't have them, and then his own hold on power will be at great risk. So I seriously doubt that Belarus will actively, physically enter the conflict. They will probably continue to allow Russia to do things inside Belarus, but at some point, the people of Belarus are going to say, this is enough. So I think it's unlikely.
Thank you, General. It was always a pleasure to speak to you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Please be safe.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.